Hi, everybody. We'll give everyone another minute or so to join, and then we'll get started. Hey, good morning to everyone on the West Coast, and good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast, and good day to everybody Central, I guess, Mountain Time. Happy Hump Day. It's Wednesday the 11th. This is Bob Buchanan. I'm the Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing for RapidScale. And welcome to another edition of our monthly sales webinar. I tell you what, the latter part of September and into early October been such an amazing and very busy channel and partner filled couple of weeks. I'll tell you, it feels like I've been traveling for the greater part of the last 2 months, and I'm sure you feel that way as well, with channel partners and certainly other events that have been dominating a lot of the partner landscape of late. And in those discussions out on the road, talking with partners, I've been getting involved in a lot of conversations around what's happening in the macro environment. What are the shifts that are occurring? What are the trends? Where's this cloud kind of disruption, if you will, going? And it brought me back to several years ago. And I've been in the cloud space, data center space, some of you may know, but going on the better part of 15 years. It brought me back to 2008, 2009 timeframe. I ran across an author by the name of Nicholas Carr. He initially wrote a book by the title Does IT Matter? He followed that up with a book that really caught my attention called The Big Switch. And Nicholas Carr's, really the theme of that book is that he draws a direct parallel to the electricity grid and to today's computing environment, or i.e. the cloud. And I put a quote in here from Nicholas in the first slide. Today, we're in the midst of another epical transformation. What happened to the generation of power a century ago is now happening to the processing information. And as I talk about Nicholas today and really his concepts, I'll weave that into how we're seeing the marketplace and where RapidScale is kind of fitting into this message. If you have questions, feel free to chime in on chat. We'll answer those at the end. As always, the webinar is being recorded, and we'll send out a copy of that to everyone who registered. So let's get into it, right? So who's Nicholas Carr? As I mentioned, he's an author, a couple bestsellers, a little bit on his educational background, Master of Arts in English, American Literature from Harvard. Very accomplished writer in a number of world-renowned publications, and certainly somebody who I would recommend reading if you're really interested in this message. So what are the similarities? So electricity has become a simple utility. So you walk into your house, you flip on a switch, you expect electricity to come on, and we kind of think of it as we take it for granted. It's somewhat of an unremarkable event. But whether you're in your office, whether you're in your house, the electricity grid is almost a given. And when power does go out, I think we all feel the pain. This is this impacts everything from televisions to washing machines, assembly lines. Everything we're doing today can that has any type of efficiency can be linked back to the ability to generate power. And then you think back, how do we turn on a computer at home? I expect Google and Gmail just to come on. I expect the computer to work. I expect when I can use NetSuite, for example, which is our ERP tool, or many of you may use Salesforce.com. It's very similar, very similar, or even more appropriate, the apps on your mobile phone, right? So from the evolution of electricity. So Henry Burton invented the largest, most powerful industrial water wheel in the country. And I think this is maybe that's obvious yet, but this is very relevant. So if you think back coming out of the Industrial Revolution, if you're Westinghouse or some type of large corporation with a significant amount of capital, and you want to go to market, and maybe you're a steel mill, you want to do mass production, you're in textiles. The way you had to do that is you had to build a factory on the water and create your own, generate your own. And water wheel was the way to do it. That locked out a lot of competition. There was high barrier to entry. Again, it takes significant capital to get to market to be able to do that. So in 1882, Thomas Edison builds the first basically electric utility station. So centralizing electricity and distributing it out to consumers and to commercial use. Henry Ford introduces the electrified modern assembly line, massive leap in the ability to perform mass production. And then we get to the 1930s, where just about 80% of all U.S. electricity is being provided by the centralized grid. So, the theme here is the parallels, I think, will come to light here in just a moment. But the theme is that as we were able to deliver electricity somewhat as a commodity from a centralized grid to both the consumer and to the commercial marketplace, we lowered those barriers to entry, and innovation took hold. So let's compare that to the evolution of IT. So 1940s, the UNIVAC, the first true commercial computer, was built, and it was really the beginning of what was known as the mainframe centralized computer environment. 1967, government-sponsored ARPANET was planned, laying the groundwork for the modern internet. Many of you are certainly aware of it. Certain people are not. The government was the first responsible for electronic transmission over what is today the modern internet. And then 1971, we get into the arrival of the personal computer, really the client-server type environments. For those of you maybe as old as me, probably remember. I remember we personally had the TRS-80s, and there was compact and IBM compatible devices that ran the DOS operating system, which eventually was the precursor to what is today Windows. And then as we get into the 2000s, the concept, we kind of got to, hey, if you remember going back to the .com race, there was that ASP model, which turned into more of the software as a service delivery model. Salesforce.com likely is I think it is the dominant example of software as a service today. Other applications that really support lines of business, such as Workday, I referenced NetSuite, and you could even consider a lot of what Google's doing on the app side to be software as a service type applications, where multiple companies are accessing centralized data center applications, in a utility or on-demand model. So really, as you lead into this in 2006, here's where you get to mass disruption. Amazon launches S3 or AWS, S3 being the storage service, AWS, Amazon Web Services, and really it's a new way of providing computing. And this is really a direct parallel to the grid in my mind, where now you can go online with a credit card and access computing power. And if you think about, again, I'm Westinghouse and I've got access to whether it's the water wheel or I've got access to the mainframe, right? I can do computational programming that other companies or smaller competitors would not be able to do, giving me a competitive advantage. Well, in today's world, if I'm a several scientist and I've got limited resources, maybe some grant money, and I'm looking for analytical data on maybe a genome research project, and I don't have access to supercomputing. What are my options? I can leverage Amazon to do just that. I can turn up compute cores and I can pull them down. As we'll talk about a little bit later, Amazon's not for every workload or application, but this is truly disruptive type technology that's really changing the way that both consumers and the commercial marketplace is consuming IT. And it's really a shift from traditional IT to next generation or utility type computing. So this slide really depicts that disruption. If you're the common IT stakeholder today, i.e. our customers, your customer, these are the things that they're thinking about. Everything from artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, which we're hearing so much about, the impact of globalization, the impact of mobility, and certainly how do you secure all those endpoints and devices. Little stat here that I thought really kind of spoke out. 93% of CXOs or C-level suite believe that digital will disrupt their business, right? 83% of organizations at risk because of complexity. Well, we know there's complexity. Complexity leads to what? It leads to opportunity. And then really the millennial impact, I think, is often understated. These folks, this generation, is not used to traditional IT at all. They are certainly used to leveraging their own devices. They're used to really leveraging the cloud in an on-demand manner. Well, guess what? They're going to be the IT leaders in very short order. And for those of you that are working with these IT stakeholders who have strong resistance to moving workloads to the cloud and becoming more efficient, that their time is likely up. So, we talked about the evolution of IT, and you get into this early 2000s. Here comes Amazon. Here comes Salesforce.com and the evolution of software as a service. And then those are followed by all these different types of outsourcing models. Well, I looked at the marketplace and noticed that the mid-market to the enterprise were the early adopters, right? And it's not just cloud's a very, sometimes an overused term, but if you think about it in a broad sense, if you think about it in consumption models and leveraging OpEx versus CapEx, the large enterprise might have said, look, I don't want to run data centers anymore. Maybe I'm going to jump into the co-location market. The large enterprise might have said, look, I've got a DevOps team internal to my organization, or lots of developers that really want to leverage, whether it's Amazon or Microsoft Azure, to do development in their cloud and leveraging those tools. They also had the dollars and resources to be able to do that. Resources are key. If you get into the lower mid-market, into the SMB space, they often lacked capital, they often lacked the technical know-how, and they certainly lacked the knowledge, right? So sometimes when you don't have the knowledge and you have perceived risk, you become paralyzed and you do nothing. So the trailblazers into this marketplace really were that mid-market to upper into the enterprise. I can remember customers calling in when I was in this industry several years back, and the term managed hosting was big. We would have customers call in and say, listen, I've got some file servers. I need some mail. I'd like to have some way to collaborate across the business, even if it's a smaller business or a mid-market enterprise. We could certainly give them a dedicated server. We can give them an operating system and a firewall, but really they could maybe RDP in, but there was technologies out there, like one of them was called Plesk. It was a control panel. There really wasn't automation to serve that smaller marketplace, and these service providers were struggling to come down market. And it's a rich market. There's a lot of companies out there that need help. So I kind of think of that marketplace as the underserved market, and it doesn't necessarily need to be the size of the customer. We'll get into what typical sizes are for RapidScale, but I look at it as any client that typically has IT in the organization, so they've probably got some resources, but those resources are limited, likely less than 10, sometimes less than 5, sometimes 1 or 2. IT supporting a line of business, but at the end of the day, it might be a cost center. These organizations, though, are looking to embrace alternative consumption models. They're looking for competitive advantages. They want to leverage enterprise-grade solutions that are now accessible to the marketplace. And then the broadband penetration. I mean, we just certainly weren't able to move data across networks, across the WAN and across the internet the way that we can today. So with the maturation of IP, we've been able to, these providers are really able to act more swiftly and more effectively. And then the maturation of the service provider just goes into automation. Today, that smaller business can come into providers like RapidScale and leverage our team for whether it be direct help desk support, or if they want a self-service portal and really make it simplistic and leverage a GUI type front end interface that's very user friendly, easy to do business with, if you will. So what's all this really mean? For those of you who've heard me speak or spoken to me about similar topics, I do like to use the term cloud confusion because there's a tremendous amount of it. And what in this competitive environment, there's so many different service providers out there, and they're all, I won't say they're all, but the vast majority of them are pretty good. We're past the days of, hey, is my data center better than their data center? These data centers today are built rock solid. But you've got really pure colo type facilities. You've got hybrid cloud type operators, and you've got real pure cloud operators that really manage to different sectors in the market. And it's our job as the service provider to educate the partner community on really where we fit and who we serve the best. Where do we win, right? The customers are out there looking at this very vast competitive landscape, multiple deployment platforms and options, and even though they may have common business challenges. So if you think about it from a sales perspective as a partner, a lot of buzz around UCaaS right now, and try to draw some parallels to, for those of you that have made kind of that jump from, maybe you were selling, on-premise analog phones that went to hosted VoIP, and now UCaaS is really driving a lot of really nice deals. What are some of the key value proposition or really drivers for this shift? Centralized management, stronger security, increased efficiency, and quick provisioning. Certainly there's more, but those are core. How can I simplify with a centralized management console? Best of breed security. How do I improve security, especially in a heterogeneous, very diverse net, with all these different platforms, with mobility coming in, all these different network components and devices and endpoints? How do I improve security? Increased efficiencies, and then certainly, as we mentioned, faster provisioning, time to market, right? Time to market often means, certainly if I'm in the services industry, those efficiencies mean real dollars. Interesting, in the parallels there for UCaaS are similar parallels to selling desktop as a service in a lot of the core offerings that we offer at RapidScale. And when you look at the growth of virtual desktops, it's interesting. This is actually a quote from Nicholas Carr, and the book was written again in 2009. So Carr argues that once utility services mature, the idea of getting rid of your PC will become much more attractive. We may find 20 or so years from now that the personal computer has become a museum piece, a reminder of a curious time when all of us were forced to be amateur computer technicians. It's a pretty profound statement, almost a decade ago. And I think we can make a strong argument that this might be happening faster than he was even predicting. I included here, some of you may have seen this before, we've kind of put this on social media and we've spoken to it, but I included this technology clock that comes directly from Gartner. And we found this clock very interesting, and I've mentioned a few times, I'll mention it again. You'll notice, and I guess I should state, what I like about this slide is it's not necessarily comparing service provider to service provider in a certain sector, as maybe like the Gartner Magic Quadrant might do, or similar to Forrester or IDC. What they're actually doing here is kind of isolating different silos of technology, especially when it comes to outsourcing. And if you look up at the top of the clock, that's market inception, right? Market start. And if you move clockwise, you move into these different quadrants, from advantage to choice to cost to replacement. And as you move around the clock clockwise, you go from, maybe it's 3 o'clock there, the dawn of standards, all the way to 6, which is the zenith of industrialization, or really the height of the market. And then you're moving towards maybe getting commoditized, risking obsolete, right? Obsolescence is coming. And then, maybe the market is at more of the dusk is settling. We highlighted in the top right-hand corner there about maybe 2 o'clock, desktop as a service. And what Gartner basically is saying, if you draw parallels to the slide at the bottom, time to the next market phase is about 2.5 years. That really means that we're hitting the market at the right time. And virtual desktops and VDI has been around for quite some time. The enterprise and mid-market has been deploying virtual desktops for a while. This is not new technology. But the DaaS marketplace, meaning same type of delivery model, same type of technology, whether you're using VMware, you're using Citrix, you're delivering it from, maybe you're using a FlexPod technology, the same type of enterprise grade equipment, that's all being distributed through a third party with DaaS. Well, DaaS is really great, again, for that underserved market. I don't want to be dealing with IT and components and assets that are losing their value and that if I've amortized over a certain period of time now are depreciating. I don't want to be dealing with break fix. I want a centralized, turn it on, I know it works, and more secure, more efficient solution. And again, getting to that zenith, 2 to 5 year run, all good things for us in this marketplace. And when I say us, I mean RapidScale and in our partner community. So where is the sweet spot? I'd say from a size standpoint, it can vary. We can come below 50. We can certainly got customers well above 1,000. But what we see, if we're being realistic, this is the target, right? And these companies, again, multi-location is not necessary, but it's common. The business profile, these are brick and mortar companies. These are law firms, healthcare companies, medical practices. You know what? If you're in the dentist's office and you're sitting in the dentist chair, technician comes in, logs into the screen there, pulls up the medical software, looks at your profile. That technician then maybe goes to the next office over. And you know what? Desktop as a service, that's a perfect application. I'm now logging into my desktop. It's secure, but I don't actually, that's not my personal screen or device. I'm moving from one office to the other, one terminal to the other. So the other key is limited IT resources. I don't have, I have 1, 2, 5, depending on the size of the organization, but they don't need to be focused on the plumbing. They need to be more strategic. And again, it's just a quick snapshot of some of the key verticals. Give you a quick example. It lines up with that profile, kind of an anatomy of a deal, if you will. Fairly decent size regional lumber company out of the Northeast, 22 locations, approximately 420 users. Really a traditional IT support model. Had a desktop platform with IBM. It was managed by a third-party MSP. That's very common. MSPs have had really good businesses. The challenge is at times is they might be regional. They lack the resources to allow these customers to scale, especially when you compare it to a company that can provide 24/7 cloud services via a global platform. So what happened was this organization, this lumber company, pulled in one of our partners, very much a traditional telecom type partner, and described the problem. That partner, falling into the cloud confusion kind of space, if you will, or that concept of cloud confusion, just went and got one of the predominant hybrid cloud companies, brought them in, and immediately figured out, hey, this might not be the right match. I might not have the proper alignment. So they called us, spoke to some of our pre-sales engineers, got our SVP of technology involved. We came up and within 30 days closed this deal. 420 desktops, infrastructure as a service, or our cloud server offering, cloud mail, cloud recovery, which is our terminology for disaster recovery, along with our SD-WAN offering, which is based on Citrix NetScalers. That deal closed in 30 days, which is a relatively short cycle for a deal this size, but this customer had a lot of pain, and we were able to align our solution with the business driver. $65,000 a month, great win. Kind of getting to a conclusion in thinking about RapidScale and the messaging that I'm encouraging my team, I'm encouraging the partners to think about is, sure, we're the desktop as a service provider, definitely in the channel. We want to be seen as the leader. We complement that with some really other core offerings that we're really good at. Infrastructure as a service, certainly disaster recovery as a service, host exchange, and security. But really more importantly, guys, I want us to be known as the company in the channel it's easy to do business with. Just like many of you, we're entrepreneurs. We've got an entrepreneurial spirit. Today, we're 100% partner focused, right? We don't have a direct sales team. You don't sell with us, we don't sell. White glove service, making sure that the customer experience and the partner experience is second to none. And then the ability to move up the technology stack, guys. We want to be seen as the company that, we're going to be the company in this cloud space that'll help that customer really get into the application. Maybe I'm running QuickBooks Enterprise. Maybe I'm running Epic, or I gave the example of the dental office, and I forget the common dental platforms, but that application usually has third-party support. Can we help them with that app? The answer is yes. Can we help them move the data and applications to our platform? The answer is yes. And again, it goes back to being easy to do business with, understanding who your customer is, and enabling them to get to our platform. So with that, we'll wrap it up. I usually keep this to 30. And again, that is we stuck true to form. We're about 4 minutes early. Might have a couple questions out there. I'll turn it over to our marketing manager, Summer Fagoni, to see if any questions came up during the presentation.
Yes, I have a couple right here, and if you guys have any more, feel free to chat them over right now. So first, Bob, what you're classifying as the underserved market is often handled by regional entities like MSPs. Is RapidScale considered a threat here?
Okay, yeah, I guess my first reaction is great question, and certainly you can't dodge it, because I think at times we could be considered a threat to some of the MSPs. However, I can give you example after example of MSPs that understand their limitations, and then we define kind of what the synergies are, and we partner. So many of them are our partners, and they're taking on some of those core traditional IT services, because again, not everything can move to the cloud. So there's going to be some assets that probably live on-prem, and then maybe there's certainly ways that MSPs can sell us, if not in our kind of our retail model, but certainly a wholesale type model where it's a little bit different type of transaction. But there are certainly strong synergies with MSPs, but at times, yes, you could see where we might displace some. So it really depends on the situation, the level of sophistication of that MSP, and really what the relationship or the willingness of the MSP to engage with a cloud provider. Good question.
Yep. Another one just came in, and this is a question we get pretty often, actually. How do you compare to Microsoft Azure in terms of pricing and ease of configuration?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a common question. So Microsoft Azure and Amazon and Google's actually growing in this market, i.e. the hyperscalers. Years ago, guys, I think the service providers was easy to say, hey, Amazon is a place where you put your dev environment, your test environment. It's not ready for production. And that's not true anymore. The enterprise is going there. And, Dwayne Barnes, our SVP technology, made this comment the other day in a session where he mentioned that Netflix runs its entire environment in AWS. So if you're a Netflix user, you're pulling that stream and that data and that video off of Amazon's platform. That being said, because I think we really understand our target market, we actually don't compete the hyperscalers very much. So what I mean by that is, if I'm calling on, let's go back to that lumber company I talked about, right? This is a company with 420 users, brick and mortar business. They sell lumber. They're not a technology company. Technology kind of helps them run that business. To get into Azure, to get into Amazon, you've got to have, you just can't take client server-based applications or even web-enabled applications, for that matter, that you might have currently deployed on another platform, move them over, and it's that simplistic. Oftentimes, it's the developers in a more mature technology, either department or technology-centric type company that is building, architecting, and designing applications in the hyperscalers, or i.e. in Azure, and then they live there. It's hard to pull them out. So again, it's probably not an environment we're commonly competing against. From a pricing standpoint, it's important to note that that's a race to zero with those guys. They're constantly battling on compute costs, and you'll notice their compute costs continues to drop. I think Amazon just recently dropped theirs. That was fairly significant. And it's usually an early gateway to get the customer in. And if you've got an application that's very seasonal, right? If you wrote that application there and it's spiky, it's a great application for Amazon. If you've got applications that are going to be always on, very stable, but they're constantly going to be using memory and compute, might not be the best application for that environment. It can end up costing you a lot more money than you initially anticipated versus a predictable cost model that you would get with us. Good question.
All right. And finally, the last one I see is referencing the technology clock. You said the desktop as a service will see height of market. With software as a service and on-demand being more prevalent today, where do you see desktops in about 5 years?
Yeah, I think we believe, of course, that's Gartner's clock, and I think it aligns well with our messaging. So we like it. We can use it to our advantage. Some of the other technologies on there, like if you go back to a co-location, was kind of getting more towards commodity. And certainly I don't see colo being gone anytime soon. But going back to desktops, in the next 2 to 3 years at least, there's going to be a big race to outsource desktops, because in these smaller organizations, mid-sized organizations, there's a good amount of client server type applications that still exist. However, we're very focused on apps. We're very focused on application performance, the delivery of the application, and eventually you're going to see that client server marketplace become cannibalized, if you will. And when that happens, yes, there'll be maybe a perceived value. It's a good question, or a perceived lessening of the value for a company like RapidScale, because you're like, well, if there's not a desktop, why do I need to leverage desktop as a service? I think we see it more as an identity management type play, to where whether your application is delivered client server based, whether it's delivered software as a service, whether you have mail, whether you have a domain that you have to authenticate against, you're probably going to need multi-factor authentication for your organization to access files. Where do they come to get via a single pane of glass to authenticate to access the applications the enterprise is actually using? I really believe we see it going that direction. Some people kind of think of it as an app store, if you will, or a marketplace that is secure, and that you understand the identity and those folks within your organization are authorized and can authenticate to get into that environment. And I think that's where we see the marketplace maybe more like 5 years from now. Is that it?
Awesome. Yep, that's it for questions.
Awesome. We're 3 minutes over. I'm going to give everybody back their day. Thank you so much for participating and joining in. And let's finish out October strong, and happy selling. Thank you.